The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, welcome to Bill Martinez. We are live. Great to have you with us. We're going to have Cheryl Chumley joining us in just a moment, the Washington Times online opinion editor and author of her latest book, Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. We're also going to be talking about Donald Trump with all his indictments. He's still beating the bumbling Biden, as Cheryl writes about, and we'll bring Cheryl on now. Cheryl, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Hi, Bill. It's great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
I always enjoy this time with you, Cheryl, because you cause me to be, be ready, to be prepared. It's and that's important for our audience because we want to enlarge the thinking and challenge the thinking of our audience in such a way, because I often say that you must own your own knowledge. Cheryl is brilliant. She brings a lot of experience to the game here and a lot of wisdom, but don't just take our word for it, take her word for it. It's important that you do your own research and own your own knowledge. Don't take the talking heads for granted, right, Cheryl?
Absolutely. Look, in my books, I go heavy on the notes because I want people to do their own research, right? And when I write a column for the Washington Times, I link where I get my facts from because I think it's imperative that people in this day and age, especially with artificial intelligence, where you can skew videos and things like that, you have to do your own research and it makes your own perspective a lot stronger as well.
See, Cheryl, you're not copping out like the other journalists today that use anonymous reporting and have abandoned tried and true journalistic principles. You actually do the hard work, research, and, have references listed there so they know that you're just not making this stuff up.
It's funny you say that, Bill, because it sort of gives me a smile when I hear reporters and journalists refer to themselves as investigative reporters and investigative journalists, because traditionally, historically, that's your job as a journalist anyhow, to investigate and present as many sides of the stories as you possibly can. And that just doesn't happen these days.
Well, the problem that we have in America today, I've maintained, is that professional journalists are few and far between. They've abandoned their right to exist in what the covering of the First Amendment gives them, the right to a free and fair press. We need a free and fair press to hold those in power accountable because they haven't. We are where we are today, unhinged and in chaos. And America's citizens are wondering what the heck happened here, right?
Well, I guess I can answer both those questions about journalists and just in general, what the heck has happened in America in one word: morals, right? The moral degradation. And it's interesting you bring up about how journalists have sort of abandoned their core duties, because years ago, Pew Research Center did this amazing survey where they looked at journalists in America, and they found that a lot of journalists self-identify as independent, and that's great, right? It sounds like, oh, we have a whole field of journalists out there who are just fair-minded and open-minded. Well, and then you start breaking down what they support by cause or campaign or principle or platform, and it's all Democrat, right? It's all the pro-abortion, it's all the LGBTQ type of agenda, and it's so much in with the Democrat camp that you can't say in America we have a morally compassed media, because by and large, most of them are also secular and atheist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's unfortunate because when you have a biased media such as we have today, but it's really gone beyond bias. It is so committed to democratic causes, as you said, Cheryl, that it prejudices everything. And it leads people to believe that, our publications today are government owned and operated.
Yeah, it's more a hateful media that we have in America right now. And I think Donald Trump was not out of line when he called the press the enemy of the people. Because
Mhm.
if you look at what much of the press does nowadays, is to take the far leftist talking points and then just run with it in their, publications and on their video channels and so forth, and then support those government narratives with anonymous sources and highly placed or well placed anonymous sources. And
Mhm.
you just get people nowadays who get their news off X, formerly Twitter, and read a headline and they think, wow, I have the facts on my side.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're embarrassed to find out afterwards. And this is what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement, Antifa, and on and on. These mostly peaceful protests that were taking place in the summer of love, right? And you had CNN and these other media outlets reporting that, it's not so bad, doing $2 to $4 billion of damage in your community. Somehow that could be a good thing, right?
Yeah, and Bill, they did the same thing, and by they I mean members of the
Mhm.
media, which I'm part of the media as well.
Right.
But the media did the same thing back when Occupy Wall Street versus the Tea Party movement was coming
Mhm.
to the forefront in America, and I saw personally fellow media members, and then watched with alarm as the national media covered the Tea Party as if they were looking for every little thing, that they were leaving trash, that they were starting fights, that they were violent and so forth, while at the same time turning blind eyes to the rapes and the attacks and then the property destruction that went forth with alarming regularity with the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Exactly. And you bring up a good point here, Cheryl, and that is that anytime there was a Tea Party event, they left the place better than the way they found it. They made a point of cleaning up after themselves. So here it is. The Tea Party, by contrast, a conservative group, was interested in holding our government into account, balancing a budget, spending our taxpayer money wisely for the benefit of all, instead of this slow creep that when it got to the other side, and it's almost like we're on the downhill side of it. This is why I keep telling people, Cheryl, that the reason that things seem to be moving with such rapidity is we're on the downside of the hill here, and it's picking up momentum.
You raise a good point, and it's a point that nobody wants to talk about, but it's a point that we really need to harp on. This country, and historically, if you look at republics anyhow, they don't last. They don't
Mhm.
last as long as our republic has been blessed to last. And part of the reason that America has lasted so long is that by and large, we've been a faith-filled group of people, right? Our
Yes,
country has historically gone to church. We were founded on a quest for religious freedom. And that has carried us well into this going into this next century of a republic. But Democrats, by and large, are abandoning their faith-filled past. They're growing it secular. They're growing vicious atheists, and they're attacking God on all public stages. And that is really the last wall that has to crumble in America before
mm,
we see utter collapse. It's God, or we have a country of big government, and you know where that leads. That's
exactly.
communism.
Well, you're exactly right, Cheryl. That really that's the linchpin of it all, and that is, we're back to the Garden of Eden. Did God really say we're going to elevate the opinions of man over God Almighty, who created everything? So this is why I mean this whole idea of climate change, and this really it's the new modern religion to replace God, but they're so disingenuous about it. They can't quite come to that conviction to say they want to replace God, but they'll dance around it. How dishonest is that?
Well, I don't know who they think they're hiding from, because, as you point out, the climate change is worship of a false god, but really the LGBTQ movement that has
Mhm.
taken off with astonishing speed these last few years is really the work of the devil.
Mhm.
And, we just saw down in Orlando at one of the largest pride parades in the world that there was an 11-year-old boy dressed as a girl, pretending to be a girl, emboldened and pressured by his parents since age 5 to become a girl, who was the marshal of that parade.
Right.
And that's the sort of thing that we're seeing in this country being cheered and embraced. and presented as tolerance and love, which is so against biblical truths. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's more than shocking. You can think in some of these events, what's next? That they're actually going to perform a sex change operation on one of the main stages of this parade event that's taking place.
Yeah, look, the LGBTQ movement community, however you want to term it, has a right to exist, has a right to freedoms, and is loved by God as much as you and I are loved by God, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's just make that clear. They're not loved any less by God, but the wickedness and evil that they bring forth on the public, that's something that we need to fight. And I think too many Christians, too many American patriots, just in general, have been reluctant to engage in that fight and call out the evil as evil because it's been very uncomfortable for them to think that they're judging others. Well, you're not judging the people, but you are judging the actions. And these people are going after our youngest, our children.
Yeah, without a doubt. Cheryl Chumley is our guest, the Washington Times online opinion editor and author of Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. The point you make here, Cheryl, is so important, and that has to do with the discernment of good and evil. I was reading the other day in one of my devotion pieces and reviewing the book of Hebrews in the 5th chapter and the 14th verse. You sense that the apostle is grabbing the church by the shoulders and shaking them, saying, you got to get off the baby formula. You need to be eating solid food in terms of spiritual nourishment, because it is maturity that allows you to understand the difference between good and evil. It's just like our kids. Our kids are young. How much do they know about good and evil? They haven't developed themselves to the point to really understand the difference. And we have adults, we have grown people in churches today whose whose commandment from God is that they would be mature, that they would be the guardrails of society, particularly those of faith would be the guardrails of society to know the difference between good and evil. But we were warned, that there would come that time when we would call good evil and evil good. And here we are, Cheryl, we're realizing exactly what the Bible said would happen.
And where's the Black Robe Regiment, right?
Yes.
Where are those bold proclaimers of the truth from the church? Now, there are a few, right? There are a few, and I'm sure you know quite a few yourself in the church community who are unafraid to speak truths. But we saw under the coronavirus, under 3 years of the coronavirus, that churches closing on demand from government bureaucrats. There were no laws passed requiring churches to close, because had there been, there would have been a mass outrage about it, right? And an uproar, people talking about First Amendment freedoms and so forth. But it was done quietly, and it was done under guise of protecting people and saving their health and so forth.
Well, they scared the heck out of them. That's what
they did. It was fear.
That's what they did. Yeah.
Which is discernment lesson number one. If it's rooted in fear, it's not of God, right?
Exactly.
But there were too many churches who bent to that fear. And that told me that, wow, our nation is really on perilous times, because the foundations have shifted so much that we're now looking to government, not God, for our liberties and our rights.
Well, and what they did was so illegal. I mean, look what's happening now. The government has to rewind and businesses have to rewind some of these firings of people that wouldn't get vaccinated, right? And they're getting back pay, and all these things are being done kind of silently in the background, because the whole basis of emergency authorization, you, Cheryl, as you well know, there had to be no other solution that could address the pandemic. If there was, an EAU would not have had any legal standing whatsoever. And this is, again, in time, you and I, we were called conspiratists. We were canceled from our media platforms and maligned. And once again, the truth of God wins out, right?
It does win out, and it's a little bit humorous and simultaneously a little bit maddening how, like you said, it's being sort of quietly walked back. And I say, let the lawsuits fly, right? I'm
Yes.
not litigious by nature. I don't. There are a lot of lawsuits out there that should not be going forward. But on this, on the mandates, on the forced vaccinations, which aren't even vaccinations, they're shots of private and public employees, I just say let the lawsuits fly. So, and send such a strong message that it would never happen again where government can mandate untested and experimental shots in the arms of Americans.
Well, the thing that's interesting, I was talking to a friend of mine who just came down with COVID, her and her son. And I said, wow. And the way they had described it to me, I said, this is like the flu. I mean, it's like a bad cold, right? And she goes, not even a bad cold. Maybe a light flu is what it is. And so I go, so for all the histrionics we went through, and I understand big pharma and some of these doctors that supported, I believe this this health narrative, which I believe was on its surface was so wrong on so many levels and dangerous because of what it was asking people to do, are being, the truth is exposing them. And how are they going to, walk back this information? But they probably are saying, well, the reason that, there's such a minor effect is because of the vaccinations. Well, that's a general sense because a lot of people didn't get vaccinated. I didn't get vaccinated. And what I did during the process was that I kept having about every 60 days or so, I was having my immune system tested because I just wanted, being a reporter on these things and having this platform, I wanted to be able to report to my audience just from one man's experience. Here's what's going on. Not that it was doctrinal. It was just saying, hey, look, I think that we're missing out on the cumulative intelligence of 340 million people who are experiencing different aspects of COVID. And this is their result with the vaccine or without vaccine. And I believe that, unfortunately, our health resources have limited that information, in order to keep us in fear and keep us from really knowing the whole truth of this, to make a really a smart decision. An informed decision with our doctor. What a novel concept, right?
Well, the lies were evident early on. If you didn't allow the fear to cloud your thinking, then you could see just in the very first week of the coronavirus hitting at America's soils that there were lies and deceptions and spins and so forth as part and parcel of the narrative. And if you didn't buy into the lies, the next thing you should have at least noticed were the conflicting statements, because you turn on CNN and one doctor says this, you turn on Fox News, another doctor says that. And so that tells you as an individual, as a thinking free American, that the choice should always have been yours, right?
Exactly.
So that's the big takeaway here. Because government's going to do what government does, try and grow its power, but we can never allow individual choice to be taken again.
You made reference to the black robes, and the fact of the matter is, when Jesus died on the cross and the Holy Spirit was released, the Holy Spirit's released in all of us who have faith in God and believe in Jesus. And we are the ones, we need to come together, because though there's a lot of, a lot of information out there, and the rise of, socialism and communism and some of these anti-God theories that are out there, the other thing that's happening is coexisting at the same time, Cheryl. There are revivals that are taking place that the media doesn't want to talk about. And because it's not just that Satan is having his way with our world right now, it's also that God is demonstrating to people that he's still in charge, that this is his popcorn stand, and that Satan will not win out. And that, people of faith, as you had mentioned earlier, we need to draw from one another in pursuit of the truth because of these contravailing indicators and opinions that are flying out there.
Yeah, one big note of optimism to me is what you just described about the uprisings and shows of faith on college campuses in America, where really have been cesspools of moral depravity for years, right? And
Mhm.
out of that is springing evidence of God's Spirit
Yes.
alive and well in America, working through the very generation that has at its disposal such easy access to all these morally repugnant things. And so
Mhm.
that is a note of optimism. And I think we in the Christian community can really build on that, because God does leave a remnant, and he doesn't need 51%, right?
No,
It's
no.
not a vote here.
Yes.
He'll whittle down until it just looks bleak and dark. And that just means his glory shines all the brighter.
You see, this is the testimony of people who've walked with God. You know, the Bible says he who knows their God will do mighty exploits. And it's not so much about the mighty exploits as it is for the experience of walking with God, having that kind of relationship and seeing God time and time again. You know, Cheryl, I tell you, I wake up every morning and I look out over a lake. I see the greenery, I see animals bouncing around, and even some crazy critters underneath the building here that make all kinds of noises that wake me up in the middle of the night. But I wake up and I'm just thankful. For God's glory and how he presents himself, with the rising of the sun and as the moon comes up, and in between are these incremental and infinite miracles that are taking place that he has created. Nobody else. Joe Biden, even Donald Trump, nobody else has done it. Only God himself.
Yeah, God is the God of the big, but he's also God of the little. And sometimes it's the smallest, tiniest thing that really takes your breath away, because you think, wow, God cares so much that this tiny little thing came from him. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, you just have to keep going in faith and know the battle's won, right? All we have to do
Exactly.
is hold our light, and that's it.
Well, real quick, if it's okay, I just want to make a detour and go to Israel for a moment and get your read on this. I mean, how quick public sentiment turned. Hamas did these horrible terrorist acts on innocents of Israel, and people saw this and they were shocked. But I mean, even before the news cycle was over, they had turned the tide, and suddenly Hamas becomes the victim. Did that amaze you? I mean, being a journalist, an investigative journalist, being around this all your life, to see something shift so dramatically and so quickly.
Not that particular thing. What amazed me is the fact that the squad in Congress was allowed
Mm,
to exist this long, and not be booted out of office for their open anti-Semitism. But
mhm,
what you described didn't amaze me so much, because I know people in the media. I know how the media work, and they're filled with people who are ignorant about the historical context of the creation of Israel,
mhm.
which is the root of all the aggression and so forth that you see against Israel. So if you don't understand that context, you're just approaching Israel's war on Hamas and Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel as if there's some sort of moral equivalency
Mhm.
to make here. You see Hamas and Israel with both having righteous causes on their side, and that if you were part of the group of Hamas, then you would have a different perspective, and we should
Right.
honor that. And so that's the problem. And I wasn't surprised, because the media is filled with people who do not do the even the smallest research in order to keep things in context and fair.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is being a discerner of that
Yes.
which is good or evil, right? I mean, because to me, it's that obvious. But understanding, the ancient hatred for the Jews that has existed in the Arab nations. I mean, while these children are in the womb, they're being indoctrinated, toward anti-Semitism, are they not?
Yes, and, and hatred of the West, right? You know,
Yeah.
how these terror groups want to do Israel, that's what they have in plan for America and the entire Western culture as well.
Mhm.
So I think if you're not discerning, if you're not biblically based, then you don't have a solid concept of good versus evil, which means that you have to recognize that evil does exist in the world, and
Mhm.
it shows itself in terror organizations like Hamas. And you can't have diplomatic talks with these people because they just want to kill you, eradicate you, and
Yeah.
wipe off your state from the face of the earth.
Yeah, how do you negotiate your demise, I guess, from the river to the sea, and then,
Right.
of course, the little Satan, the big Satan, and, people are, non-discerning to realize that, America's next in line, and, "Oh, yeah, by the way, our border's been so wide open, we have terrorists coming into the country. We've already have a cartel network, a supply chain that goes into the interior of our country in all but maybe 8 states. It might be less than that because I think it was reported maybe about 60, 90 days ago that it was that cartels had tentacles in all but 8 states, but they're ever growing. So they may have covered those 8 states by now. God only knows. But Mayorkas, the Biden administration cares little for our national security, and they've let the gate wide open. Meanwhile, lying to the people, telling us that the gate is secured.
Yeah, cartels and radical Islamists, right? Which I'm sure they have terror cells at a
Mhm.
state and community near you. And
Right.
let's not forget the Chinese nationals that were discovered crossing the border too,
Exactly.
which they've disappeared into parts unknown. So we've got this huge threat facing our nation right now, and a lot of it is due to the weakness of this puppet president in the White House. Even more of it is due to the failure of the American people to put God first.
Yeah. Well, and the fact of the matter is this current administration, an extension that I think most of us accept, is the third term of one Barack Hussein Obama. And this is what Barack Obama had seen in the fundamental transformation of our country, right?
Oh yes, the fundamental transformation of our country, Barack Obama's favorite mantra for
Mm.
America, and that he was a president who did more damage in 8 years than we've seen Democrat presidents do in maybe 50 years. I mean,
Mhm.
he really, with his pen and phone way of governing, and his total disregard for the Constitution, and his real scorn for the American people, he has turned this nation down a path that is more akin to communism and collectivism than it
Mhm.
is to a democracy, a republic, any of the things that founders gave us.
Yeah, and look at all the other people that jumped in with them. Hillary Clinton. And of course, we know her influences and who mentored her, but it was like this cabal that was taking place. Joe Biden, I don't see him as some intellectual genius that had an original idea. I think he went along to get along to be in this seat, in this power seat that he always dreamed about being in. And what an embarrassment to himself and to the American people. When you consider the presidents that have filled the seat in that Oval Office historically in our country.
Yeah, and we all saw just on Veterans Day how he stumbled and completely made a mockery of veterans in this country with the wreaths, and he didn't know which way to go, which way to go. But we've all been watching with alarm his mental decline. But it's moved
Mm.
from the area of humorous and mocking to the arena of dangerous, and not just for America, because we would not have seen Hamas to do such a bold, open terror attack on Israel if Donald Trump had been in the White House.
Clearly. And Putin would have been held in check. Xi also, and Rocket Man as well. I mean,
Mhm.
Joe Biden has brought this country to the brink of World War III, Cheryl. I mean, you got to call it for what it is.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people have been saying that, myself as well, at times under this administration, that it seems very World War III out there. And
Mhm.
it's just, it's time to rally around Christian principles and really dig deep and get a relationship with God, because if you don't have that, it's only to get bleaker and blacker. The forces who are enemies of America know they only have a year left of Joe Biden, and I suspect that they're going to try and do all their long-held strategies before he leaves the White House.
Yeah, without a doubt. And if not, they'll do everything they can to interfere with the next election to secure, if it's Joe Biden or at least a Democrat in office, that they can control, which they have patternly been able to control over the years, time and again. I mean, it's quite clear with the exposure of and the writings of, whether it's Miranda Devine, yourself, and Peter Schweitzer, in terms of how our elected officials have been captured by these foreign entities. And here it is. Whose interests are they most concerned with? Is it ours, or is it, President Xi? Is it Putin? And yet Donald Trump, they accused him 3 ways to Sunday of being compromised. But there's no paper trail or any kind of smoking gun that would indicate that he took any money, from these foreign entities. But yet we've got all kinds of smoke when it comes to the Biden brand, coming from, Ukraine, Russia, China, go on. And we're talking, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars involved here, Cheryl.
You raise a good point. And, Donald Trump was indeed the great disruptor, right? And not simply because he was a member of the Republican Party when he ran for the presidency, because there are too many Republicans out there who have thrown in with the Democrats in terms of bringing forth a more globalist agenda to America than even Republican versus Democrat. And I think that's the greater concern here, that we don't just need a Republican in office or somebody better than Joe Biden. We need somebody like Donald Trump who recognizes the threat is globalism more than just simply the Democrat Party, because it's the globalists who are working through the Democrat Party, like Hillary Clinton and other powers who be, along with many in the Republican Party who have agreed with the idea that China is the next world power and that America needs to get in line and stand aside and allow China to dominate on the world stage. So we need to consider the globalist agenda more than political parties at this point.
Well, sure, you're exactly right. But globalism is socialism, is it not?
I would say it's even more than that. It's communism / Marxism. And if you just want to put a word on it that nobody can argue with, it's collectivism, right?
Yes,
it's the
right.
State above the individual. And that is a decimation of America, where we are all about the individual because we know our liberties and rights come from God.
Yeah, the reason, I guess, socialism, because title your book, number one. The other thing is I think people are hard to understand. It's like you want to have a Jack Nicholson moment in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. It's communism. I mean, this is really where that, because all roads, I think it was Karl Marx said, all roads lead to communism, and that's where it's heading. I mean, clearly, because as you said, there's no individual rights. It's all about big government.
Yes. And, it's the left really that plays with the language. They're very clever at disguising their communism or collectivism by calling it different things. The Democrat Party itself is filled with communists nowadays, but really they started years and years ago and they called themselves progressives and Democrat progressives back when socialists used to be a dirty word. Well, look where we are now. We have open socialists serving in office, which I don't even understand how they can take the oath of office.
How do they do that?
How can they? They have to swear allegiance to the Constitution, and yet they stand in conflict to everything the Constitution stands for. So give it another, couple of years, and then socialists will be leading to open communists serving in our politics.
Exactly. Trevor Loudon has written extensively on this. In fact, he shocked our audience, I think it was well over a year ago, Cheryl, when he said that there were over 100 card-carrying, to your point, card-carrying Democrat socialists that have been elected to office that serve in Washington, D.C., supposedly on our behalf.
In one of my books, I can't remember if it was the latest or the one before, maybe it was both books, I'm not sure, but I looked at the Democrat Socialists of America and how they have infiltrated the public school systems by recruiting members of their own, mindset to go into public teaching and teach the next generation in the socialist collectivist way to go. And they put all over on their website all the great benefits you have for being a public school teacher, including, and this is interesting, the fact that it's very hard to fire teachers. So once these DSA people get their members in public school systems and teach the next generation to hate America, they're very hard to fire. So look at that in relation to what you just told me about the 100 serving in DC.
Exactly.
The next election doesn't look very good.
Well, and this is why, even with Donald Trump, I mean, Donald Trump had a rough 4 years, and look what he was able to do with all the resistance, Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic Party, members of his own party. I mean, you think about it, but for one thumb being, down instead of up, thank you very much, John McCain, Obamacare would have gone by the wayside. But, in spite of that, we were energy independent. Our border was secured. There was peace in the Middle East and about ready to break out with the Abraham Accords, 5 Arab nations ready to come to the peace table. So many positive things. People were working, blacks, Hispanics, minorities, everybody all the way around. But I guess America couldn't handle that kind of success and winning, that we had to just feel like we were unworthy and grovel and pay $7 for a gallon of gas.
Well, Donald Trump and his Make America Great Again and America First agenda, that wasn't just a bumper sticker. It was actually the guiding principle of what he put forth in the White House. That was something that really ticked off the globalists, right? And so they went into overdrive, into hyperdrive, in order to just riddle his administration with one scandal after another. Russia collusion, it was just ad nauseum with the Russia collusion. Never a shred of evidence, but the media ran with it because the media is in bed with these globalists and Democrats and so forth. And in the end, he was still able to do a lot of good for America, despite half the time having to fight off these far leftists who just wanted to destroy him and his family and make sure the MAGA type America First agenda never reared its head again. And look where we are. There's a lot of people supporting him to this day.
Well, it's become a pejorative, like the Tea Party. They turned the Tea Party into pejorative. Like, what are they guilty of? Holding the government accountable, doing what our Constitution says we have every right to do, civic responsibility. Oh, no, they're bad people. They need to be maligned. They need to be put in that basket of deplorables, as Hillary Clinton said, that are worthy of reprogramming. I mean, this is all very dangerous. Cheryl, I don't know about you, but I want to send a bill. I want to send an invoice to Hillary Clinton. I want our money back for the lie that she put out there on the Russian collusion. How many millions of dollars of the people's money did we spend because of that big lie? All on her. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't misreporting by some reporters that just, didn't get all the facts. This was all orchestrated by her and her campaign. And then we send another bill to the so-called 51 intelligence officers that said that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, right?
And while we're at it, let's start sending out the bills now for the indictments that Donald Trump is fighting off while he's on the campaign trail for president, running against the president in power right now, who is in charge of sicking all these federal law enforcement agents and state law enforcement agents against Donald Trump too. So, I think the American people is well aware of the deep state type agenda that's running through our country and destroying our law and order and system of justice. And you can see part of that in recent polling of independents. They're not voting for Joe Biden. So who else are they going to vote for at this point?
Well, they need to vote for Donald Trump with a conviction of understanding that it's going to be bloody. This is, what they did was a coup. And what needs to come back is a wrecking ball through the governmental institutions that you referred to that are so well entrenched and impossible to fire. But the deep state is deep. It is complex, and it's going to require somebody like a Donald Trump and the backing of whether it's his party or independents, maybe some Democrats who might wake up with a conscience and realize that if we do not come against these malforces that have taken over our government, this great America idea is going to go into the into the ash bin of history.
We need a course correction. I agree completely. We can't have somebody come in and try and do the diplomatic dance with Democrats, because that'll be wasted 4 years of nothing happening except emboldening Democrats further. We need somebody who can take a sledgehammer to the evil forces that are really rapidly and brazenly trying to destroy America from within our own political system.
I was talking with one expert, Cheryl, and I mentioned that the deep state has become, the fourth branch of government. And he says, Bill, I want to correct you. He goes, actually, there's 3 sub-elements to the deep state. And I said, yeah. And I go, he broke it down. He says, well, you got the administrative state, which is part of the deep state. You have the law enforcement, the FBI, Justice Department is another level of the deep state. And then you have all these NGOs, which is a third level. So really we have in essence 6 levels of government that are in operation right now. I mean, look at the breakdown. When you really look at what's going on in the border, look down the road and you see all these NGOs that are participating in this illegal incursion and invasion that's happening at our southern border and even our northern border, for that matter.
Yeah, the non-governmental organizations have been sort of, they've been very difficult to cover over the years because they have that quasi-government status where they're sort of subject to public records and so forth laws, but they're sort of not. And so it makes it difficult to track where the money goes through them and so forth. And then when you add in big names like George Soros with the tentacles going in each and every direction of all the NGOs, it seems like it's very difficult to get to the truth
Exactly.
of what these organizations do in terms of destroying American principles.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad you brought it back to the truth, because that's the bottom line. See, we don't know the truth. This is an old CIA dictum, is that you plead plausible deniability. We heard it first spoke, from the lips of Hillary Clinton publicly in the public square. But people need to understand, this is the order of the day within our government, is plausible deniability. That's why we have these endless hearings. And you see these people and I go, what did you expect? Do you think all of a sudden, Christopher Wray is going to say, oh, you got me, I lied? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, I think we need to, and I just had a conversation with somebody about this. I think we need to give up the idea that we're going to see Hillary Clinton or Christopher Wray or Democrats, in handcuffs being led away to jail and so forth. That sounds great. It sounds great on the campaign trail, and it's a good way to rally people. But as for actually going for that in terms of realizing it, I think it's a time waster. And I think as Christians, we actually need to count on God to bring about the final consequences. And we just live this life, staying within the realm of reality and trying to make policy differences, not put people in jail as much.
Yeah, you don't have to, you don't have to give up your faith in this process. Recently you wrote about, Donald Trump, and with all the indictments and everything, he's still beating, quote unquote, bumbling Biden, because there is a clear contrast here. You see, and I thought the contrast was quite clear in the 2020 election, but, people can decide whatever happened. I appreciate that over 60% of the country believes there was shenanigans in outright voter fraud. But like everything that runs in the government, we may not even realize and accept that voter fraud did in fact take place in 2020, though a majority of Americans believe that it's rather suspicious, and they don't have confidence that there was a free and fair election. But here we have 2024 around the corner. And, if we are at that critical point, we cannot have another 2020 election. I think that would be the undoing, the final death nail for America. What do you say?
Well, I think that there have been some states that were problematic before, and that's putting it in a nice way, right? Problematic, that have done the hard work of reforming and cleaning up some of the voter rolls. And they've also put in place protections so that maybe ballot stuffing or, long distance voting isn't as frequent as it was under the years of the coronavirus, because of course that was the Democrats' big excuse to get everybody to stay home and mail in their votes and so forth. And we don't have that this time, but we also have states and localities that have enacted some legislative reforms. And I do hope that people aren't dissuaded from voting. I hope that people actually go out and vote in the Republican Party, and not think that what's the point? Because I do think that this time around, people are going to be ever watchful on the vote counting. And we've got polls that show that Trump is leading in 5 battleground states right now against Biden. It's only going to get more in Trump's favor as Biden stumbles more.
Well, you bring up a good point in terms of Republican voting. Traditionally, Republicans have waited till the day, and the Democrats have been able to expose that as a weakness. And the Republicans need to match up. Voters need to match up with, the pressure and the focus of voting as much as the Democrats do in order to level the playing field, if that's even possible, Cheryl.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing for me to say that Republicans should actually vote early. I get the strategy behind it, but I hate the idea that America has moved away from an election day, and we're not just on election week; we're actually on election month. It seems
exactly. Yeah.
And it used to be pretty strict. If you were in the military, you could vote absentee if you were sick or elderly, ailing, out of state, but you had to get permission. Now it's everybody and anybody. If you don't feel like going to the polls that day, just vote from home whenever. And so I hate getting away from making the case for election day, but I do see the strategy behind that.
Well, you got to play the rules that are out there. I'm like you. If it was me, if I was king for the day, I would say, look, at one day, we take the day off. We honor our civic duty. We honor this country and the great American idea. We go out and vote. And this idea that you can, go to nursing homes and get people who have maybe 60 seconds of lucidity and capture a ballot from them is disgusting. And we know that this is what happened in the 2020 election. The Democrats and these operatives have no conscience. And Republicans want to play fair, but it's not fair. And they need to grow up and understand that this is a war. The Democrats see it as a war, and they're desperate, and they're not going to roll over easy. We must match the intensity. And I say I'm talking about people who care about their vote being counted.
And we have to recognize the evil, though, too, because there are plenty of Democrats who they don't care about the means so long as the end is the way they want it. And so they don't play fair. They're not ashamed of outright lies and deceptions. And if they're caught red-handed, why, they have their friends in the press to come in and cover for them. So we have to see the evil that's inherent in much of the political system nowadays, and not be taken off guard by it. We have to get ahead of it, actually.
Well, when you have a former Attorney General, Eric Holder, looking into the camera and swearing that voter fraud doesn't exist in America, go, what planet did you fall in off of? What are you thinking about? The Heritage Foundation has hundreds, if not thousands, of documented cases where people have been arrested and they're serving sentences for voter fraud, Eric Holder. So if it doesn't exist, then why are they in jail?
Well, Eric Holder also said that he was Barack Obama's wingman as well. So
Yeah.
if Barack Obama wanted to, change the foundations of the nation, it makes sense that his wingmen would put that type of narrative out there.
Yeah, without a doubt. Cheryl, got about a minute and a half left here. Your book, The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. I'm going to give you an opportunity to summarize and wrap things up for us as we come to a conclusion of this discussion. And our thanks to you for coming on the show, by the way.
Oh, thank you for having me. So, Lockdown and the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom just starts by going through what happened under the coronavirus, but then warns in the future how the globalists, how the Democrats, how the George Soros and Bill Gates types are going to segue from the coronavirus into something more, specifically climate change, and use the same types of fear and fear models to seize our individual liberties. And this time it won't be just for a year or two, it will be forever.
Exactly. Well, they did it before. And if you want to know what somebody is going to do, look at what they've done. And they were able to, do a lot of damage to this country. And hopefully it's retrievable because, I think, Cheryl, of, our fellow citizens who were so fearful about wearing a mask and being fearful of those not wearing a mask. It became so combative. And it really was such a gross encroachment on our liberties, wasn't it?
It was. And anytime the government is mandating you to do something, your first reaction should be why, or even I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Cheryl Chumley, thank you for being with us. Cheryl's the Washington Times online opinion editor, author of Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Be blessed, Cheryl. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us to be a part of this movement to return to God, because that is the answer. This is the solution to all the chaos. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you, and may his peace rest upon you. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless.